So this next portion, we're going to facilitate discussion, we have a panel here of folks that we're really grateful to for agreeing to participate, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Actually, I just wanted to say thank you to them for being here and helping with this. But we are hoping to facilitate discussion, so certainly everyone is welcome to chime in, to ask a question, to just share a personal experience along the way. So again, just like you were earlier, don't be shy about breaking in and being part of the discussion. So with that, I'd like to ask everyone here to introduce themselves, and if you could let us know your current job title or description and your relationship to our survey program. Whether you want to state that in terms of past employment, or maybe just like the largest, favorite, or most recent survey that you've done in North Carolina. Just your pick. Do you want to start, Jennifer?
Sure. I'm Jennifer Martin. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I'm half of MD and Historical Consultants. There's the other half, Cynthia. I've been working in North Carolina a very long time, 33 years, I think. I used to work at SHPO. I worked for a big firm. We have a little firm. I've done a lot of survey. Favorite survey or favorite?
Most recent, if you don't know.
Oh, well, right now we're working on a survey of Wilson, and it's mainly mid-20th century resources, and it's actually very interesting, very fun. Wilson was booming after World War II, so there's a lot of great, and US 301 goes through, so it's great roadside architecture and, restaurants from the 50s. It's really interesting work. And then last year we did Edgecombe County and Tarboro, and Tarboro was interesting because we literally started in May of 2020. And there was, so when you talk about talking to the public, there was no talking to the public or any public at all. So that was an interesting survey. Yep, that's it.
Thank you.
I'm Audrey Thomas. I'm the survey specialist in the Western region in Asheville. I've been with the office for 5 years. And most recently I finished up the Clay County survey with Michael Ann Williams. And we just finished up the windshield survey for Graham, so that's hopefully the next project.
I'm Kelly Malloy. Used to be Kelly Lally, for those of you who might remember me from like 30 years ago. And currently I am an architectural survey specialist here in the Raleigh office, and I'm working solely with the projects funded with the Emergency Supplemental Historic Preservation Fund for Hurricanes Michael and Flora, is that right? There were 7 county-wide surveys going on. Now I think there's still 4 or 5 of them going on. And way back when I was a baby surveyor, I did the Wake County survey in the late 80s and early 90s, up to mid-90s. And so that was my biggest and my most favorite North Carolina surveys. But I've been also helping out with some field work with some of our hurricane surveys. So that's some current experience too.
I'm Peter Sandbeck. Can you hear me okay? I'm the Cultural Resources Coordinator for Orange County, which means I have staff for their Historic Preservation Commission and for their Agricultural Preservation Boards. I kind of merge those two into one. They have overlap, though. I've learned over the years that these farmers who are trying to preserve their farmland love their own buildings. It's been very useful, good connection. But yeah, I got into this thing a long time ago. And I'll tell a couple scary stories because I can take a little minute. Catherine Weischer and Michael Southern introduced me to this whole trade, craft of survey work. And they dragged me out when I started at SHPO in the late 70s, the dates right there. They dragged me out one time, and Catherine, it was a test. So we went to different places, Smithfield among others, and then Southern Wake County, not where she was. And said, tell me what you're looking at. They'd stop. She had these buildings that she would make you stop at and say, how do you know that that's an 1840s and not a colonial And it was, you know, I was young, I was new, I didn't know always the nuances that would allow you to, but I guess she accepted my take on it, and ultimately that led me to do my own county survey work in Raven County, the first one in 1980, which just to touch on what you talked about earlier, that was a no contact with the public kind of survey because the SHPO wanted the county done, it was a blank spot on the east, but nobody in Craven County knew about it, nobody cared about it. Couldn't find the buildings. So I have some good war stories I'll tell later, but the whole idea of how you could walk into Rockets Yards and talk to them. And when Michael and Catherine tutored me, I got obsessed with survey files, obsessed with documenting buildings, some of the great files. I would go in the weekends to Lewis Smith House and look at the National Register files, read some building profile sketches, detailed blowouts and different aspects. This is amazing what we can do to document these buildings. But then you get out in the field and you realize the buildings are just one little piece of the story. You're really kind of a cultural documentarian. That's what became fascinating to me. What I would give to have had voice memos back then. I mean, you know, the stories you try to capture, right? And, you know, and they were beyond, you know, my wildest dreams. What people would tell you after inviting them into their house. As a total stranger, they'd always say, "Where are you born?" And so you had to get used to that. Anyway, I was involved mostly as a coordinator for surveys, 8 of them or 9 of them altogether, PI of 3, and learned so many things about people, mostly and how you handle people in those. But it's probably the most satisfying piece of my job. Ultimately, things I've done in the preservation world. So remember that sometimes. Thank you.
Before y'all get started, y'all need to match Jennifer's volume. Good job, Jennifer.
The microphone.
Before we move forward, I will just say that Catherine and Michael took Peter in the field for an architectural test. Peter and Claudia turned around and did the same thing to me before the Fieldwork County survey. So this is generational trauma now. They didn't give me the Greek Revival, Colonial Revival. It was a late 18th century house with a big, ornate post-Civil War porch on the front of it in Pitt County. Okay. So our first question is a broad one. So the question is, why do we survey? And you can either answer this on behalf of our profession or personally, or you can think about it both ways.
Well, I mean, I think you covered it in your slides. I mean, it's the basic building block of this whole field. And it's how we know anything. It's how we know how to evaluate anything and how to, I mean, it's the beginning. And I've always thought, you know, I've come across a lot of people in this field, and I gotta say, somebody who's done a county survey, I feel like that's the minimal. You've got to have that under your belt. And it's not, you know, you're gonna be poor and you're gonna be dirty and you're probably gonna have to live in a bad house. And it's just not gonna be, you know, so that's just kind of paying your dues, but I think it's important that you have that under your belt.
Forgot to mention you have to pick off ticks.
Every dog bites, whatever, all the things, car going off side of road in Macon County into the down the mountain. So.
Sheriff pulling you out of the ditch when you try to turn around. Well, I'll answer personally because the building block thing is the key. But I got into survey work because I was fascinated with connections. If Catherine and Michael had taken me out and given me a test at the beginning, I would have failed. I would have failed because my training is as a folklorist, and I did traditional and vernacular architecture in a different state. So I would not have been able to identify anything at the beginning. But with their tutelage, I was able to learn pretty fast, knowing that what my little corner of Wake County or whatever I was working on is going to be different than what you see over in the next two counties over. But it did teach me how to look at things critically, and then eventually start to make connections. And that connections was the point that I really, what really interested me in this type of work was the connections between buildings and history, people and buildings, people and history. And then as it went on, the communities, I just kept seeing the building blocks, the communities around and how the people in the buildings related with the communities. And then eventually how a county with all its different parts fit into the state.
And I can echo that. Like I said, I became obsessed with the fact that we were documenting and capturing the stories of these buildings, and then the stories of the people was the big connection for me. And the people helped me understand a landscape that was, I was profoundly ignorant of the landscape coming from urban Philadelphia, going to rural counties, and Craig, it's completely foreign. So in a way, I invited them to help me understand what I was looking at. And this is what I worry about. Back then, they loved to do that. There were people who grew up, the grandparents, the great-grandparents, they all grew up right there. And I don't know that you guys have the luxury of that now, because they can reach back and tell you almost everything that you ever want to know, more than you ever want to know. So like, I got to go, I got to get to the next site. And just the way they help me view the landscape in a totally different way than I ever imagined was possible. So my daughter used to just rail against me driving through rural East, and I'd be talking about all the tobacco. Well, you don't know how important this march. Look at that march got perfect. Well, that's all I know. Dad, stop. But you learn to read the landscape that way. You learn the meaning of all those connections that you're talking about. They all make sense. And we're getting lost in rural surveys, but town surveys, the mill village and the mills, the different ways people made money, it's all connected, the rivers, the railroad yards, whatever. So yeah, the connections and how they help you. I mean, I feel that's why we're so lucky. What else can I say?
Okay, so this next one is, why did you choose this work, and why do you stay connected to this work?
I'm going to say probably the most important thing to me was mentors. And I had two mentors. My first mentor was my grad school professor who, when I was in grad school in Tennessee, was working on a book called Tennessee's Historic Landscapes. So how much fun was that? Because we drove around Tennessee taking pictures and talking to people, and I was like, this is what you do, this is great. I was in a preservation program, and there were people talking about what they were going to do, and I was like, that's all I want to do. That's what I want to do. And then when I was at the end of grad school and I saw that little advertisement in Historic Preservation News, y'all don't know what that is, it was a newspaper, and it said, intrepid individuals wanted for rural county survey in North Carolina, call Catherine Beischer. And of course I knew who that was, since I'd read all her books. I was like, oh my God. So I came, I had a test, it was a slide test, and they said, we're going to ask you about buildings in North Carolina, so I memorized her books. And I went in there and I was like, oh, that's the new Bull White House, and it's real hot shot. But anyway, and of course she became my second mentor, and what can you say about Catherine? But she taught me to have a sense of humor about things and not to take myself too seriously in this work, and to talk to people and how to talk to people and how to love what you do. And so, I was in grad school. I had no idea. I liked, I was always the kid at the family reunion and talking to the oldest person in the room because I just love to hear those stories, but I didn't know how to connect that with this, and those two individuals made me see that that could happen, and that could happen, so that's my story.
Well, I first did survey work in grad school at the University of Georgia. I was hired over the summer, both years I was there. So that was kind of my first step into survey, and I really liked it. It was a lot of fun. And then so when I got hired here, I was really excited. I was in Ohio, but I was excited to come back to Virginia and have the chance to do a survey. And I think it's a lot of fun to kind of get out into the field and meet people and like be able to hear parts of their history that they're excited about and get to document that. I think that's exciting, and just being able to learn each new place. There's so much to learn about.
Well, the connections, what brought me in, learning about the connections, and the mentors have brought me back. Claudia, sitting in the back there, Ruth Little, Catherine Weischer, Michael Southern, Peter was a mentor, and some of the other restoration specialists who would take me out and teach me things. But also I learned so much, and I feel like it's been something that I've enjoyed doing is to try to pass on some of the knowledge that I gained over those years, and still learn too, because there's still so much I don't know. I really like that back and forth with people who are out in the field.
And mine was a detour. I didn't start out to do this work. I think it chose me in a way. Because I was like a UVA architectural historian and classical, and it was all by the book. And I got down here and I was hired to be a restoration specialist to work on helping people restore their buildings and helping them take their buildings back to the beginning of time, scrape them back down to the original, like how Honeycutt used to do. And starting working on tax credit project reviews, that kind of thing. And then I rode around Michael Southern one Saturday, hot summer Saturday. He took me all around Franklin County with a bunch of beer, and that was a fine day. But he just took me back into place after place after place. And he knew most of the people he was visiting. And at the end of the day, we sat down in somebody's house, and they had old-time fiddle music. It was like, well, if you know Michael Southern, it's old-time fiddle. And I was like, that's about the best day I've ever had in terms of just the whole experience. And I said, I don't know, maybe I need to do some survey work. So when the chance came up in 1980 to go down to Craven County and do a county survey, I was like, this is it. I'm getting out of the office, going out in the field, I want to see the world, and I want to learn what they are doing. I want to learn that thing that they know. They can talk about everything they're looking at, and I just thought that was amazing. So that's what got me. Was just seeing how much people already had been able to figure out about the landscape of the buildings.
Well, it sounds like one of the common themes here is just the people that shaped you and got you on your way and got you integrated in the field. And I would say for myself, answering the question, why do you stay in this field? That for me, it is people. It's not only is it the people that you meet doing survey and the people you connect to in communities, but this community to me is a big part of why I stay in historic preservation. That at a certain point, you're not, sort of the honeymoon can be kind of over with a particular architectural style or even a particular region of the state. You're like, well, I know a lot about it now. But just like continuing to have relationships and conversations and just knowing that you can see something one day because you're out driving around and you're like, I know exactly who I want to talk to about this. So to me, the staying factor in historic preservation is just the ongoing conversation with mentors, but also peers and emerging professionals, and just keeping that passion that we hopefully all feel, but we certainly all felt at the beginning, moving forward to a newer generation too. So the next thing I was going to ask is, how did you learn to survey? We have, a lot of people have touched on this already, but is there anything else that you guys would like to say about how you learned to be a surveyor? And you might feel you've already answered it.
It was baptism by fire, really. It was, I mean, I was fresh out of graduate school, and I was driving these roads, you know, with a map by myself at first. I mean, I was probably dangerous. Looking at things I didn't know what I was looking at initially. But I think that curiosity is what saved me and brought me forward, is that I was really interested in, you know, okay, now I see that this one is a little different than this one over here. And I would come back, and of course I wish I had, these days you could have shown a digital photograph to somebody and say, hey, what is that? I just have to describe it or wait until Randall Page had developed a photograph so I could do this. Like, what is that? Tell me about that. And they would say, oh yeah, when you see that, you see that kind of wide windows, usually, mid-19th century versus the tall, narrow ones with that many panes in it, that, nails and saw marks and I'm still not all that great at those things, but that's how I learned, is literally doing it over and over again and asking questions and asking questions and asking questions, and I'm still asking questions. So if you happen to catch me up there, I might be asking questions.
And just final, learning to survey, I don't know if I really learned to survey under a teacher. You just kind of go out there, like you say, you're just out there all of a sudden, realize. But I had two people who showed me amazing techniques for documenting stuff in their survey forms. And I don't know, some of you, Tony James worked for the shippo for a little while, a guy named Tony James, and he wrecked a couple cars on the way. But he was an artist too. He was a great, architectural historian, and he could sketch out all the molding profiles. He'd walk into a room and just, okay, here's the background, the windows, and the mantle has this kind of molding and this kind of molding, and this is by 1810 to 1830. And he just could do it in about 5 minutes, and have the whole room just kind of captured the wainscoting sketched out there. And I was like, damn, how did he get to do that? He's just a talented artist. I was never a talented artist, but, and then Catherine Weischer showed me kind of the opposite of the Tony James form, which is kind of Catherine's. If you've ever seen her, they're free form, just kind of real schematic, whatever, and they're all over the page. There's a huge amount of information, and what I had to figure out was my compromise. It was a personal battle for me to say, I can't do Tony James, but I can do somewhere around half the question. Just get it down. Just the worst note is better. I look back at those files now. I'm working on a book project, and I'm looking at files that were done in the 1970s. There's so much information in those. It's priceless. You never know that. And so that was kind of part of learning how to find your happy place at the level of documentation. Don't try to overdo it, but just get it all down as fast as you can. There's got to be a better way to do it than sketching. Quick video in hand over.
Okay, so you have a choice. You can either tell us about one of your best days in the field and what made it the best. That's my preference. But if you think it's more instructive, you could tell us about one of your worst or most discouraging days in the field and why it was that.
I don't want to talk about the worst, because
That's fair.
I don't know if I've had one best day, but I've had the same day, kind of day, many times, which was, and Kelly said this, connecting with people. I mean, last year in Edgecombe, I sat down with an older gentleman whose wife had Alzheimer's, and you'll find this in rural counties where there's a person taking care of a person with Alzheimer's. I've had this so many times, y'all. But she had passed away, and we were sitting down at this dining room table, and he was talking about her, and he was just crying to me, and he was telling me how wonderful she was, and how she was the best mother, and, just, there was he was just pouring himself out to me. It was just, I don't even know know what the house was. I didn't care after that, but it was just amazing. Just 2 weeks ago, I was in Wilson, and there's this big, grand brick colonial revival right next to I-95. It's very sad. Right next to I-95. And I just knocked on the door. It was on the list you gave me, so I had to go survey it. I was like, nobody's going to be at this house. And the woman opened the door, and this was her parents' house. It was from 1959, completely 1959 inside. She said, come on in. And we walked around, and she revealed her mother lived to 104, and she died about a year ago. And she just showed me this house and showed me her mother's paintings and her mother's quilts. And she told me about her mother and showed me her mother's wedding photograph. And then she turned around and said, this is a lot, y'all. She said, my father was bipolar and lived upstairs and abused all of us. And just the fact that this woman she told me, you know, she said when I was 14, I told my mother, I will kill him, he will kill us, or I'll go to boarding school. And she went to boarding school, and she's a psychologist now. And so this whole, I was there 2 hours, and we were best friends at the end. But unfortunately, she said the house will be going away soon. So just those connections are, it's not like that we're bean counters. We have something, there's a substantial thing to what we do. And we might be social workers 1 minute and, historians the next, but all of that to me is pretty great. That's it.
I'll tell a story from Clay County. We met a lot of really super nice people that invited us in and talked to us for a really long time. We're super outgoing, but one guy stands out a lot. He was very skeptical when we showed up. Someone had emailed me his name and address, but he did not know we were coming. And so I got out and talked to him and told him who we were, and he was very skeptical. But it was really cool, I think, throughout the course of the day, or not day, but a couple hours, watching him kind of open up and get excited that we were interested. And he brought us inside and showed us pictures. And then, was actually, I'm going over towards this site if you guys want to follow me. So he gave us a little tour around. And yeah, it was just really cool to see him open up and get excited, as he got more comfortable with us and tell us more information.
I agree. I think it's such a personal thing, really. And that's one of the things I like the best about it is that you're talking, when people can talk to you, and sometimes these days it's hard to get people, find people, first of all, but when you're able to talk to people, it's something very personal. And they do tend to sometimes tell you things, sometimes you don't want to know, but sometimes that it's you feel like you're really, really connected to people. But one of my favorite stories, I have a lot of favorite field stories, actually took place over several months, 2 different acts. And it's about a connection, and it's about paying attention as you go. And there's an area up in northwestern Wayne County called it the Herrick. And because I hear Herrick had come through at some point in time. And there was one house there, and I went up, and there was a lady sitting on the porch, and she was a little odd the way she talked to me. But she showed me her house, and then she said, "There's my piano." And it was, it looked like a player-type piano, and I'm like, "Oh, great." Great. As I kept surveying around the county, one day, her name was Hazel, I was talking to a man who said to me, "Oh, did you go up to the Hurricane?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've been up there." He said, "Did you meet Hazel?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah." I was miles away in eastern Wayne County by that point. He's like, "Did she show you her piano?" And well, yeah, she did. "That's where she used to keep her moonshine." Oh, yeah, she was a moonshiner, and that's where she used to keep it to hide from the revenuers. And I'm like, wow. It was just an amazing, connection, and also reminding me that even though Wake County is massive, that, there's still all these webs among people and places.
I'll do a good and a bad. The good I'll start with, and you never know what you get when you get out of the car. Okay, go. I went up to a house I planned to record. This is a Craven County story. Again, had double shoulder, Flemish bond chimneys, asbestos siding, kind of run down looking. Go to the door, and this just basically, I don't know how to describe her. She was a sort of a disheveled country woman, answered the door, and she had this white stuff dripping down her chin. And she greeted me, hey, how you doing? I said, oh, my snuff. Oh, she wiped it all off. She said, oh, I cut my snuff with flour. And and then she invited me, and she was preparing her lunch. I had to go back to the kitchen and eat lunch. She was the mother of one of the county commissioners helping to fund the project. And I had no, you just have no idea what you're going to find. But you're sort of shocked when you open the door and you see, oh my God, what's this? And then another time, not far away from that house, I drove, up the driveway. It was a little AAA one-story and just a little farmhouse, nothing remarkable. And the driveway kind of went around back, and I stopped my car and got out. And coming around from the back of the house, there's a guy in a big, leather apron with blood all over it. And he had an axe or a hatchet in his hand. This is real. This is real. I'm not making this up. and he said, hey, howdy. And I just kind of looked, really, it's the guy from Philadelphia, seeing a guy, city kid. I said, oh, sorry, I've been killing chickens today. Excuse the blood. And then he gave me a fabulous tour of his house and told me the story of his family. But it was, it's one of those moments you will never, ever forget. And the third one, there's one more. Really disreputable house, two-story, back in the piney woods near Havelock, North Carolina. I've never driven through there anyway to beach. godforsaken place. And it was the house, stand of pines, and then a ways off, it looked like a sort of rural junkyard over in the field. Wow. Let me try the front door. So banging on the front door. Nobody came to the door. So I started coming out from the front porch down the steps. And about the time I heard a loud bang, there was a bunch of stuff raining out of the sky on me, which was the shotgun pellets that he shot up into the pine trees. And I noticed there was some smoke coming out of a chimney in an old school bus over in the junkyard. So I was like, oh shit. And it's like, get out of my property! What are you doing? You know, so I'm hands up, I'm going, I'm leaving, and I never got a picture of the house. But that's the only time that ever happened. And that was a warning shot. He wasn't trying to do anything he wanted to do.
Beth,
Yes.
can I add something?
Sure, please do.
When I first came to North Carolina, I inventoried, surveyed Lincoln County, and I was living, not even in Lincolnton, but like suburban Lincolnton, Boulder City. I didn't know anybody. I don't like talking to strangers particularly, or knocking on doors, so for what it's worth, one can hear all these wonderful, cool stories, but it can be difficult, and you just have to keep going. And there were days where I could not make myself go out and look at houses or whatever, and it was a tough year plus whatever it was out there. So, if you're first doing this stuff, you might think, consider that you will get better at it. You may not get great at it, I don't know, but you'll get better at it, and you'll have a better idea of what you're doing. But there's I don't know, I don't know that it necessarily matters who you're mentors are, but there's just a tremendous learning curve, and you just have to go out and do it, and knock on doors and record things, and go back home if you're somewhere where you don't know anybody, make your own dinner, but so keep it in mind if you're sitting there thinking, oh man, I've never had those wonderful experiences. Maybe I'm doing the wrong thing.
And it can depend on the kind of survey you're doing. Like when I did Duplin County, there was a local coordinator, and I would go talk to the Rotary Club, and I would go talk to the Old People Club. I don't know what they were called, but there were a lot of old people. And it was like a lot of immersion, right? I was immersed in this community that was very, this is in the early 90s, y'all. Nothing had ever happened in 200 years there. So I told my mom I'd go in the grocery store, everybody would stop their carts and look at me, because I was like the only new thing that ever happened there. And so it was easy, I'd drive up, oh, we've been waiting for you. And then you can go do we were in Edgecombe, and nobody knew that we existed, right? There's nothing to tell anyone that we were there. So it depends, you can have a very different kind of experience.
But I think no matter what, when you're starting out though, you have to be willing to understand that.
You really
There's
do.
a whole hell of a lot that you don't know and you don't know how to do.
Yeah. And the circumstances, like working during COVID, I'll tell a very short story. Cynthia and I drove up to a house. There's a guy sitting on a bucket or something, I don't know. He was sitting there in his yard like this, and he wasn't looking at the driveway, so we couldn't tell if he even saw us. So we drove up and we got out of the car, and then he turned around and he started walking towards us, and he has a gun on his holster thing, and he's walking towards us, and we just stopped, and we told him what we were doing, and he said, oh, I thought y'all were coming here to give me that vaccine. And I was like, oh. And he turned out to be delightful.
He went back in the house and brought out photographs and all kinds of
Quilts that he made, and he was Episcopalian. It was crazy, but he thought we were like the government to give him a shot.
It was alarming too, because the house was overgrown. He was living in a trailer. No, not even a trailer, like an RV.
Yeah.
He was living in the RV behind the house. So we pulled up, we didn't know if anyone was there or not. The other thing I wanted to mention earlier that started happening in Edgecombe County and has continued, and I think it was because of COVID, is we often went to people's houses and we knew they were there, but they did not come to the door. And that has really persisted in my experience in the 5 years since COVID. They're just, I guess, the proliferation of Ring doorbells and things like that. People see you. I always do have an orange vest on. They just figure I don't want to talk to that person, which is their right.
I don't answer my door.
I know, but
Sorry.
I think in those situations, I'm a lot less comfortable taking a quick picture or two on the way out, because I know that I've been observed, and I have made myself very, very visible, but I don't know. Sometimes it's just really hard to get someone to pay you some mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Marvin, for that side of things too, because survey is an incredibly rewarding job, but it is a grueling job. And I don't know how many, I think I got a year into the Beaufort County survey, and I thought, I am never going to finish surveying this county. It is going to go on forever. I am going to be at the end of my career, and this is not going to be done. And Beaufort County is not a particularly, it's a large county, it's not a particularly dense county. And I wasn't doing the municipalities. But, you think about, you're often out in the winter, or potentially worse, it's summertime, and you're out in the heat all day, and you're in the wind, and, you're driving from place to place, and every time you stop somewhere, you've got to sort of like, oh, let me go talk to a stranger. You got to screw your courage up again, and then hopefully you have at least an average interaction, maybe a great interaction, but sometimes you explain what you're doing and the person's just not having it. And you feel kind of stupid. It's your job that this person is like, what do you mean the government is paying you to be at my house today taking photographs? So you get home from a day in the field, as you all well know, and you just sort of lay on your couch and think, I gotta do this again tomorrow. I'm gonna get a lot of sleep tonight. I'm gonna do this again tomorrow. And hopefully, the majority of your interactions are positive, but it's hard work even to be like on and enthusiastic when you're meeting a great person and it's the 8th great person that you're meeting that day. So it's fun when you go back to working more of a desk job to like, you're sitting there on a beautiful day and you're like, I could be out in rural North Carolina right now looking at outbuildings, but here I am at my desk. It's easy to romanticize the best parts of the job, but it is, I think as everyone here well knows, it is a difficult job, although hopefully very rewarding. Josie?
I'm curious to hear any of you talk about strategies to not let the person who either warmly welcomes you with stories or tells you to get off of their property, how not to let the vibes of those interactions influence your later evaluation of the property. Because so much of it has to do with just whether you had access at all and you didn't have the opportunity to maybe consider the property more thoroughly. But however you guys would like to take that.
So you're saying like if they're jerks, then we wouldn't say it's eligible?
It's not just that they're jerks, but that they have denied you the option to consider the property. So what are the strategies to balance that out? Or to just say, I have no access?
Well, we've been encouraging our surveyors that we've been working with to document what they found, first of all. And if they felt weird, say, we didn't have good access to them. But also, what is kind of cool about the survey today, and I'm not encouraging people not to fully survey if you have the opportunity, but there are other tools. So say, you just couldn't get up to a house, but you can also make a file that has a little bit of Google Street View images put in there, so somebody could see it, or you couldn't get a good picture because the trees had grown back. But in 2010, there was a good picture, and the aerials can also tell you something. So, which I didn't have, anything like that. So there are some additional tools to document something that you still think is important, even though you weren't able to completely survey it the way you want. But we also encourage people in their narrative summary to always start off with what they found. There were mean dogs in the yard, and therefore I did not get out of the car. There was a fence, there was a gate, and so we stopped at the gate and got what we could from there. There was a wonderful, the owner was there, was willing to tell us about the history, and we've got additional contact information for later if we want to call that, positive end.
I think another, maybe it's a related issue, is I think you also have to be sensitive to certain populations. We documented, this is so weird, in an old church in Edgecombe County that was used for migrant housing, and it was terrible conditions. And I don't know, I felt really, I didn't want to take any photographs, so we kind of waited till they went inside to do that. I don't want to make them feel like, do you know what I mean? I have this in Wilson, I found this great old photograph of a pure oil station, and now it's a tire business, and it's run by all Latinx, and I'm not going to survey it, sorry, because I'm not going to stand there as a white lady and take your picture. I don't even know, that could be terrifying to someone. But I just remember those ladies in that church, and they're living in really, it was criminal, honestly, that agribusiness, giant agribusiness was housing them in this old church in terrible conditions. So, I don't know if anybody else has ever run into things like that, but it's happened a few times in eastern North Carolina with migrant labor. So.
I ran into a similar, but it was a women's shelter.
Oh yeah, they won't let you, like, I've had that in Vegas, they're like,
You don't know if that's what it is.
right,
You just walk out.
schools, no children.
No schools.
Weekend photography.
Yeah, I had to do the DMV in Wilson. The DMV in Wilson is a hot issue right now because if you've been to the DMV lately, you can't actually go anymore because you can't get waited on or whatever. And so there's a line out, there's like 50 people in line all the time, and it's tiny, so they're all outside. So I had to go on a Sunday and take pictures of it because everybody's angry and they're in line and they're just like, I'm sure they really want me to 5 on your sides here, I don't know.
I was going to add on to what Kelly said, just as far as what you wrote in the narrative summary, and I think if you can't get inside something, or you just can't get even more exterior access, but I think this can be important, or you see something, you can say that in the narrative summary. And we had a few in Roxborough, I think, that couldn't get into, but she showed us the pictures anyway. She's, we couldn't really consider it for study list, but it's kind of flagged. So if anybody does ever talk about it in the future, somebody passes away, and you get someone inclusive, or there's all kinds of weird, I feel like all we deal with a lot of times is one-offs when people call about properties, and you just don't know in the future what people are going to call and ask about. It's really helpful. As someone who's now looking back through Claudia, being able to have access to Claudia, her old notes, or Michael Simon's old notes in a survey file, and they've drawn this little quick map, or made some quick notes, like, oh, this conversation happened, or whatever, like, it's very helpful to have that as a newer staff person, to, be able to say, somebody considered this, somebody thought there was more going on in this house than what needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And although this would never be our desired outcome, Audrey, I know you had a couple of places in Clay County where, exactly 2 places in Clay County where people said, no, we don't want to participate in the survey, but it was just, like, if any of you went back, maybe with a DOT road widening project, you would be so confused why Audrey and Michael Ann had not surveyed, like, the best house on this whole stretch of road. So we don't want to get in the habit of creating survey files for things that we haven't really surveyed, but in a couple of cases, we really do need an explanation of why that great bungalow didn't get flagged on HPO Web. So, out of 176 properties, I think, we could consider acceptable to have 2 that were basically Google Street View. And then if that's what we have to do, just to explain why I didn't get surveyed, honestly, more than anything. Sarah, what do you want to?
I can't remember, I don't have my agenda in front of me. We're pretty close to stopping. Yeah, 3:45, so.
Okay, well, I guess I'll just say, does anybody in the audience want to ask anything else?
Oh yeah, I'm always good for questions.
Oh, yeah, please.
Technically, it's going to have to be a 2-parter because of the demographics. So our veteran surveyors, you want to talk about how technology has both made your jobs easier and harder. And for our young one who has always known technology, you just got to tell us, what's the coolest old thing from the olden days that you've run across in the last 5 years? It's like, God, you people used to do it this way? Whew.
I'll say that when we did Edgecombe last year, and somebody mentioned USGS maps, that's how I started, is with USGS maps in that's what we did for Edgecombe. We bought, I don't know, 20 maps. And that's how we did field work, because I can't, there's no way I can use a phone, and I don't even know how to do that, but, you know, we took all the maps, went on HBO Web, and mapped everything that had already been surveyed, basically, on those paper maps. And I mean, this old dog cannot learn a new trick when it comes to doing a county survey on a phone. No way.
So you're not a GIS whiz yet?
Well, I use it all the time, but in the field, driving, no, because this is how I put the map on the steering wheel and I drive like this. Okay, it's very dangerous, don't do that, but that's sort of the old things clinging to me, but I love the technology. I mean, I think it's great. During COVID, like doing research, I did a, Claudia, thank you, reviewed a nomination I did that there's no way I could go to the railroad museum in Missouri, and so I was emailing volunteers, and they were sending me pictures of other railroad cars, and doing all that research. There's no way I could have done anything if I didn't have the internet for that. So it's great. I don't love the database, sorry, but I love the old yellow form. Loved it. It was great. I feel like it was more free form and more, but I get why we have it, and I do it, but I don't love it. I don't love the pull-down boxes. I don't love any of that. I feel it's a little squashing of my ability to, read a building, but it's the way it is, so that's all I have to say. Before I get in trouble.
I'm kind of the same way. I'll just say when I started working with the Wake County Planning Department on that survey, there were 2 computers for the whole Department of Planning in Wake County that you had to sign up for to use. And by the time I left 7 years later, we all had our second desktop, so things changed dramatically. But I didn't have a real, my mother probably been happy with some of the places I went by myself. But I think the ability to very quickly look at an aerial view, very quickly see if the Google cart had gone by, 10 years ago, so you could even see what it used to look like, it sometimes is really, quite frankly, amazing. And also the ability to do pretty quick research on something, just to kind of get some basics down, and more in depth if you want to, but it's just amazing. I had my dog eared Wake County, gold seal book, as Sarah calls them, where I was cross-referencing and trying to get the families in and photocopying them for the file. And now a lot of times I can get some of that stuff really easily off of Ancestry or the newspapers even, on Kindle and see and it's just like amazing. But also it is a hazard because the rabbit holes are everywhere. And you have to say, okay, I gotta stop. And then it's about what somebody else should do later on.
I totally agree with all that, because it is, we've seen it all. You're like, labeling the black and white colors. Going back to Marvin, that was the worst part. The hot summer day, then you had a whole pile that they just sent you. You had the label right on it. It was unimaginable to you guys. Now, it's still annoying to label the digital, I know, to do your calculations. But to me, echoing everything they said, I agree, the ability to take, the GIS map information from your county, the photography is great, then if you're lucky, historical map data is digitized for your county or your town or whatever, just to have all the Sanborn maps online, the UNC site where they have the Google map overlay on the Sanborn. That's wonderful. That stuff that saves you so much time, and to be able to take your property back to the soil survey map, the original soil survey map, and that's on the map here. It just allows you to pull so much more information. I feel like we get much richer information than we could have ever outside of the oral histories that we will always need to rely on and will miss forever. There's all those old ladies who love to talk about their houses.
I just think I love the technology, it's great, but I also love to go to the library in the town. The Wilson Library is unbelievable. There's nobody in the local history room. I've been in there several times, nobody. So don't forget that part. You know, there's stuff there that's not online. And, I mean, when we did our first county surveys, there was no, like, Calvin's like, don't go to the deed office. Why would you ever go there? Now you can, you know, in 2 minutes, you can get a change title. But it's like, don't knock on the door of the deed office. Don't ever get to that level, you know, just talk to people. But now you can, you know, spend 3 hours on one house, getting every detail of the house, which is amazing.
All right, what's the coolest old thing you've seen that made you scratch your head or something?
I don't know. One thing I'm very thankful for is digital photography. I think that's nice to be able to take like a ton of pictures and not have to worry about film. Pretty ideal. I do prefer USGS maps, so that's something that, especially doing like a county-wide or rural survey, it's a lot nicer to have that.
I think if you ask Andy really nicely, he can send you the PDF of your quads that you need with all the shippo markings already on it, which is amazing.
This big.
Well, you gotta plot them out, then that's the problem. You gotta print them out on the plotter. He won't print them.
For folks in the room who are a little bit younger, to sort of answer part of Matt's question, one thing that had to be explained to me, so you might not understand this either, is that before digital photography, the single most expensive part of doing survey was taking photographs. And so if you're ever in an old survey file and you're thinking, why did they take 2 photographs of this great thing? It probably had to do with the budget. It probably wasn't, you know, a lack of time or a lack of access. It was just, all right, like the old Wilson survey files are really stingy. Jennifer, I noticed a couple of years ago that there's just like usually 1 photograph, and there's even a few places with no photographs, where I think Kate's budget just, like she could take at max 1 picture. So that is why digital photography is so great, is that we don't have to worry about the budget anymore, for the most part. I know there's still like ink for printing contact sheets,
But you were out in the field and you might have had 2 rolls of Tri-X left, you know, lucky to, like, okay, I gotta make this last all day, because you can't find it in your little town. You're waiting for somebody to mail it or something. That was a problem, it really was a big problem.
anything else?
I feel old.
I resemble that person.
I prefer seasoned.
I thought about talking about how Jennifer mentored me, and then I was like, this will make her feel really old. And now I learned to drive with the map like that too. I mean, I have people in the car with me be like, do you want to hold the map? I'm like, nope.
It's the best.
Well, we just thank our panelists so much.